Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Guest List podcast. I'm your host, Steve Guest. This week is a solo episode, and I've entitled it The Voices in Your Head. We've touched on things like this in podcasts before, and what I mean by voices in your head, I don't mean that I'm perhaps going crazy and people are talking to me and I'm hearing voices. It's not that. It refers back to a great book by a guy called Steve Peters. It's called The Chimp Paradox. And I'm sure some of you will have read it. Some of you will know the kind of general premise of what the Chimp Paradox is about. But I'm going to just read a paragraph out that perhaps gives you a bit of an overall explanation. So each of us houses a primitive chimp inside our brains. It's driven by emotions and prompts us to react to the world, perhaps irresponsibly. If you've ever struggled to stay in control of your urges, succumb to temptation, or sabotage your own success, your chimp has probably taken the reins for a bit. Fortunately, our brains have also got what we call the inner human, who, when functioning properly, keeps the inner chimp under control and allows us to interact with the world in a stable, positive, productive way. The Chimp Paradox, psychiatrist Steve Peters talks about a mind management program that helps us to perhaps manage our inner chimp and lead us to a more fulfilled, happy, successful balance within our life. And if you think about things, if you think about anything you've ever wanted to do, tried to do, know you should be doing, and you hear that inner voice or that little voice or the chimp saying you're never going to be able to do it, you can't do it, why would you do that, you're going to fail, you're going to fall on your face, it's not worth doing. You hear all these, I suppose, emotionally driven thoughts that prevent you from doing something. And ultimately, it's there to protect us. It's there to stop us from getting in harm's way. Sometimes it's a good thing because it's emotionally driven. It could be that you've got a gut feeling about something, and that gut feeling could be accurate. And actually, it stops you from making an irrational decision or doing something that could get you in harm's way. So it does have a positive element to it, but more often than not, when I think about the inner chimp or that voice in the head, it's about stopping me from doing something that potentially helps me to move forward. The chimp is there for self-preservation. It's there for self-survival. It's to stop you, as I say, from getting in harm's way. The human element is the rational element. So what are the risks involved? What would happen if I failed? What would happen if whatever I'm attempting to do doesn't work? Is it really going to be that big a problem if it doesn't work? If I fail once, twice, three times until I get to a point where I am finding some success? And whilst I'm thinking about this, while I kind of plan a podcast episode which was about the voices in your head, it got me thinking about everything that has got me to where I am today. And I've picked up some milestones that hopefully you can start to kind of think in terms of where your life's at and perhaps the decision making that has got you to where you are. I was told when I wanted to be a recruitment consultant that I'd never make it. I wasn't confident enough, wasn't salesy enough, didn't fit the profile for what they were looking for. And whilst that's somebody else saying that to me, my inner voice could be going, yeah, I completely agree. Do you know what? Perhaps I am a buyer. Perhaps I am that conservative, unassuming, quiet person that deserves to sit at the back of the room and not make an advance as a consultant, where you should be salesy and confident and flamboyant. But I went for it anyway, and I've made a success of it over the last 16, 17 years or so. When I recorded my first ever social media video, that was 2 years of procrastination. That was 2 years of my inner chimp getting in the way of a rational mind that says, do you know what? Actually, the upside of telling people what you do in the form of video on social media has a far more positive impact. And I've never looked back since doing that first video. Writing a book, I was told, why would you write a book? What's the point? Why would anyone want to listen to what you've got to say. You start thinking about these things. Why would anyone want to listen to what I've got to say? Why should I write a book? The average author, published author, doesn't sell more than 50 copies. What's the point in writing it if I'm only ever going to sell less than 50 copies? Creating an online recruitment training program is a risk. It might never work. I might not get anybody sign up. Why would you put all them hours in, knowing that at this point, nobody's even going to sign up? Are they going to sign up? How are they going to know about it? What am I going to do? How am I going to market it? It's just going to fall flat on its face. It hasn't. Conducting first live webinar, that was scary. I mean, knowing that you're going to be speaking in front of 100 plus people in a live event where you could have IT problems, you could forget what you're talking about, you could say the wrong thing, all these elements and thoughts come through your head. The live webinar was a huge success, 100 plus attendees. Conducting first ever speaking gig, I've now done 3 or 4. I'm not a polished speaker by any such, and I'm learning as I go. But the ability to get out there and do it, knowing full well that it might fall on its face, maybe it won't work, but it's getting past that inner chimp that stops you from doing things. Starting a podcast, this podcast is now 16, 17 months down the line. My first thoughts, why would anyone want to download my podcast? What have I got to share? Can I create something that adds real value that people want to turn up and listen every single week? Writing a second book's now published off the success of the first one, where the inner chimp could have stopped me from doing it in the first place. I'm now going to embark on recording my first audio book. First thought, does anyone really want to listen to my brummy dulcet tones? Well, hopefully you're listening to the podcast, so you'll listen to the audio book too. It could be really simple things. It doesn't even have to be business or work related achievements. I've started going back to the gym this year, as some of you know from earlier podcasts. Trying to get your 6-pack when you're in your 40s, is that even possible? Of course it is. But the inner chimp will probably tell you, do you not want to sit on the sofa of a night, watch a film, nice glass of cold beer and a packet of crisps, which would be my ideal, by the way, maybe pork scratchings. But all these things, you start to create these excuses. You start to create reasons that you adjust to that allow you to not do something because it scares you, because it's outside of that comfort zone. Why do we stop ourselves so often from taking that extra step and going out there to achieve something? And quite often it's before we've even got started. It's crazy really how our brains work, how the human kind of almost protects itself from actually opportunity and achievement, because we fear too much the negativity that potentially could come with it. Ultimately, what's the worst that can happen in terms of the choices you make? What happens if you fail? Generally not a huge amount. It's a learning experience. It gives you the ability to be better next time, make the second attempt even better, be better informed so you can make or take advantage the next time. What's the worst thing that happens when you get ridiculed online or you get attacked by a troll on social media? Not a huge amount in my experience. And yet, okay, it might affect you. You might have a little kind of, I don't know, deep breath and think, how can they say something like that? But ultimately, if you keep moving forwards, you keep going, and it's rational thoughts and the human rational element keeps the chimp in place to ensure that you're making the right decisions. For me, there's no looking back at all. And some of the best opportunities, some of the best people I've met, some of the people that I surround myself with now that really propel me forward have come from the moments where I've not listened to the inner chimp. I've not listened to the voices in my head, and it's allowed me to progress forward. They say life begins outside of the comfort zone. The fun begins when you take a little risk. If you don't risk anything, you risk everything. Ultimately, we only have one life. And this was a quote taken from the Andrew Silito episode. You only get one life, so go and live it. If you're always within yourself, it will be the biggest regrets as you get older and you think back about things you wish you'd done or gone out and attempted. I found another quote just to end this podcast with, because I've really enjoyed kind of doing a little bit of thought ahead of today's podcast. Life is a series of calculated risks, nothing more. Everything that you decide to do has a margin of risk. No outcome is ever 100% certain, and therefore any attempt at anything has a chance of complete failure. We risk everything every day of our lives without even knowing it. So what's one more risk? Go and make it happen. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Let me know any questions. Let me know any future podcast episodes you'd like me to cover, any guests you'd like me to interview. Give this podcast a rating if you haven't yet. If you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify, or you're watching it on YouTube, obviously reviews, comments, anything like that, shares really help. Hopefully add value to a wider audience. Thank you so much. It's a truly humbling journey to have such an engaged network and group of followers. So I wish you all the best. Don't listen to your inner chimp too much, and I will see you soon.